So welcome back. This is like week I don't know 5 or 6 now. So I feel like this is selling into a rhythm. It's kind of what I'm hoping for. In the absence of being able to hang out in person, like this is a nice way to chat. Does anyone have topics or questions before we go into like the regular chapter discussion? Follow-ups from last week, Max. I see your hand up.
No, I have something that I wanted to talk about, but I'm not sure it's really related to the chapter. If that's okay.
Yeah, no, it's okay.
Like
yeah, the chapter is more like
progression.
Exactly. The chapter is more like a prompt to.
All right.
If we got nothing else to talk about, we'll focus on one thing.
Yeah. So basically, what I wanted to talk about a bit is because, like, when I came into software development, I used to be a project manager, and as a project manager, like I started out watching just videos of Martin Fowler and Ken Beck and those people, and they talk a lot about testing. And for me, testing was always like this kind of daunting task where it was really difficult for me to get started, simply because also I'm a web developer. I feel like it's less common if you work with front end. And I wanted to ask like you guys if you had some experience with that, or because it seems like every very good developer prides himself of being a very good tester, but truthfully, in most company I've been in, I haven't seen that much testing going on. So I don't know if it's that like everyone is like sharing the same experience, or I have just been in the wrong companies so far.
I see Melo smiling.
I was going to say I could actually probably speak on that a little bit. We didn't have too much of a software engineering culture where I worked. However, the one thing that was very clear on the outset was that we value testing. And that's kind of something that's a mindset I've adopted. I pride myself very much so on creating robust software that is testable and is thoroughly tested. I know it's a little bit different on the front end side. I don't personally know too much testing on the front end side other than like creating system tests. So like through like Selenium or something like that. But yeah, that's it's a little bit different from the back end. It'd be interesting to see like a front end perspective on that. But yeah.
On my side, I guess I have two approaches, because like I like work. It's mostly data science in my team, so like my team goes through a lot of work in testing on like multiple parts. So for example, like there is like we have a QA engineer that tests all the APIs, and we do a lot of like TDD. So like the QA engineer starts at the very start of like the API designing process. So like he writes the tests first on like based on like the specifications of the API that we have to build, and then our data science team and machine learning engineers work on getting the API to pass basically. And so it's very important. But then we have a lot of things that we do on our data warehouse, and like testing like data warehouse migrations is a little bit more interesting, because we use like DBT and other tools like that for our transformations, but we have to use a lot of different tests, because we have tests for just making sure that like we don't lose data from one run to the other, because like a lot of companies, like we do recreate the warehouse on a daily basis. So every night there is a process that just recreates the data warehouse with the new data coming from the production database, and then we have to test for making sure that the migration is correct, but also we have to test for like making sure that we don't have like data that is way out there. So we use a tool that's called Grade Expectations. So we know what we expect for a table, and it tests statistically whether like the numbers are within certain ranges and stuff like that. But also we test for the table shape, like having the same like correct amount of columns and stuff like that. So it's a little bit different for data testing. I do much more like front-end testing now, and it's a little bit complicated because it really depends. It's a little bit more complicated, I think, to test front ends, because you don't know where where to at what level you have to start or end. So it's a little bit more complex, and I feel like a lot of people don't really do TDD on front ends because it's much more overread and much more slow than you would otherwise do in other testing practices.
Yeah,
like for me, sorry.
Oh, I can contribute on the front end side. I actually introduced Cypress to Netlify. Oh, Trey's here too. I actually helped to introduce Cypress to Netlify, and yeah, it's definitely end-to-end tests that have the most value in front end. That nobody does TDD. Yeah. Sorry, Max, you're gonna say something.
No, yeah, like TDD, in fact, like TDD, like by the book, kind of is fantastically hard in front end. Like for me, it's like inconceivable how to work like this. Like I'm always kind of struggling between with the fact like maybe I don't understand it, and maybe like there isn't like in front end is just a different world. So that's where kind of like I was doing like this class right now about testing JavaScript of Kenzie Dots, and
Yeah.
it's really useful, but like it's not really it's not really bringing me that much further in TDDing my front end. It's really hard. I feel I don't know.
I don't think I've ever actually met anybody who does like by the book TDD. Everyone kind of does a little bit of a variation of it, at least. The one that I do, I mean, you just write your code and then you test everything that you need to test. Testing is a bit of an art. Like I said, I've never actually met anyone who's by the book TDA. I'm sure they exist, but
worked with a few of them.
Yeah.
Trey, is that what they do at Amplify? Like,
no,
I actually don't know the testing environment Amplify,
there. We tend at least like for like Geo, the category I'm working on right now, we keep about an 85 to 90% unit test coverage, and we have end-to-end tests for absolutely everything. It doesn't get shipped unless it has an end-to-end test done, and we run every single one of those every shipment, of course. Yeah, we have enough end-to-end.
But how slow is the test suite?
Our test suite takes about 30 minutes to complete. And that is running at least like 30 or 40 of these in parallel. Like most of them take around 5 to 8 minutes to complete, and they're all running in parallel. And then we have like 6 that take like 25 minutes. Yeah. If we didn't have them in parallel, they would probably go like 3 or 4 hours to actually complete all those tests.
Yeah, I feel like to me, like especially when I was like started testing, I feel like Cypress and overall the experience we were using Cypress over like testing library in general for like specifically for React stuff is so much different, because like I can actually write tests that are intentional in Cypress, and in a testing library you need to really think about like at the individual component. Like you can really like it becomes a little bit more complicated to mock everything in using testing library, because it gets like the overhead to write a single test becomes so much that like at the point that like if I have to mock everything just to make sure that like my async data gets loaded appropriately, and I'm never gonna use the loader like mocked function again for one test passing, at the point I'm just gonna do it in Cypress, so that I just wait automatically in Cypress and I just wait there. And it's just like a little bit too much overhead, but it has its usefulness for sure. It's just there is a lot of overhead, and you need it kind of enforces you to have like a good structure of your components, so that you know how much you can test them before you just switch to Cypress, because it's just easier.
Yeah, for what I've experienced in it, like the main thing, because what I've done a lot with both AWS, Amplify, and even previous companies was I was always kind of like the underlying engine stuff. Like I would be changing out the engine underneath while everything's running. And so even those unit tests like were pivotal for me knowing like TypeScript is one great thing for refactors to know nothing broke, but then the unit tests were pivotal for me for knowing things were not broken. So honestly, like even the feature that I am doing a PR for right now with Amplify and Geo it's in developer preview doing geofences. As I'm creating the actual GA release PR for that, I would say about 2/3 of it is all test code. And so it's in it, and that's unit test. That's not the end-to-end test. That's in a whole different repo. So I definitely get on, like, it's a lot of overhead, but I've done some things that it would have taken me so much longer to be confident in if those hadn't been there. When it comes to TDD, yeah, I've only known one person that ever did TDD on the front end well. And he was like the senior engineer on the first team I ever was on in tech. He was more of a back end guy, but he was like old school, had been in the industry for so long. And then it was like, whoa, you actually do this and it works. And he actually did it really well. Like I paired programmed with him for a while and he did it really well. And I'm like, I wish I could do this. I don't know why my brain just doesn't do that, because it actually was really good when you get a flow with it. But I think most people just aren't used to that style of flow. I'm definitely
Trey.
Yep.
So I think you reminded me that of one of my favorite stories of interviewing. I got a job because I did TDD in an interview. So the process is like this, right? So this is an interview at Moz. No, not Moz. God damn it. No, it's not Moz. It's one of the analytics companies, one of the sort of marketing analytics companies. I forgot their name. I actually have a very good impression of them. I just forgot what they're called. Starts with an M. Anyway, so they give you a bunch of requirements, right? Like in a coding interview, they give you like, here's what you're, here's the problem. Here's what you're supposed to make an algorithm that solves that problem. So what you do is you write every example down as a test. Right, and you sort of build up a test suite, and you start asking questions like, okay, what if this value goes to 0? What if this value goes to -1? What if this value goes to 1 million? And really start thinking about edge cases, and then have them clarify. It's actually that's how you should do an interview, right? Like you clarify all the cases, but instead of just writing them down as like in English, write them down as a test, and then as you develop your answer, just keep running your test until all the tests pass. Which was TDD, but I didn't actually think about that. I was just like trying to solve that question, and then they specifically, when they gave me an offer, said that they really liked it a lot because I was the only person did that. So it's good interview technique. I should probably make more noise out of that, but
yeah, that
reminds passing it on.
Interesting for me that whenever I'm doing like job interview prep and I'm doing like lead code and all that kind of crap, I have a whole repo where I keep all of that stuff in. So I can see like my historical answers and stuff really easily. And one of the first things I did in there was set up a testing suite. And so when I'm doing that, I actually do TDD when I'm doing leak code stuff because of that exact there. I want to be able to explain the edge cases and be able to sense those really easily. But then when I get on the job, it's like, yeah, fuck.
Real life problems are more complex. Okay, we have one question from Brian. So I don't know what you mean, Brian. He says, so for Cypress testing, can you use try catch? What does that mean?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Hey guys. Hey Sean. One of the things that I have on my list is learning Cypress and Jest, but I know just like what they are, but I've never actually like implemented anything with them. And I was wondering, sort of like, obviously testing, I've had to use tests for like Solidity, so like I get that, but when I'm using React, when you say like you use Cypress and then you implement like a testing thing for components, like what does that mean? Because can't you just do like if else or conditional rendering, so like show this under the state, otherwise show something? Am I thinking of testing in the same way, or is that different with a Cypress type implementation? Antonio, you were just talking about that, but I was curious.
I feel like what testing versus the implementation of the component.
Yeah, I feel like so one thing that like testing in like the way that I test like individual components. For example, I can make an example of like a button that I'm testing that or actually like the one test that I had to do recently for an interview was a toast notification that changed the color of the alert based on the type of alert I was receiving. And so you can actually have the component itself just accepts a type, like a props with a type and a message. So, and you basically just render, and like in Gesture RTL, basically it just renders in a virtual DOM without having to like write it to screen or something. It just renders it, and checks the output of this rendered like HTML, and you can make tests based on that on the markup that you receive. You can check on like the classes. You can look for tests like text inside of the markup and so on and so forth. So that's basically how like Jest RTL really works. You just see the rendered component and test against the render component. You expect stuff in the render component. For example, I was checking, hey, if I have a warning, I want to make sure that I have an icon that has a data name of like warning. Like, so whenever it renders a warning, I check, hey, is there any in my tree? Is there any element that has a data warning, like test ID of data warning? And if yes, then the test passes, meaning because it's actually showing as it's supposed to. Otherwise, it doesn't pass. So, and Cypress instead, it actually renders the whole website and paints everything to the screen and just interacts almost like interacts automatically in like a headless like Google Chrome or whatever you're running it in, and it just tests against the real website that is rendered to the screen. And actually, technically, if you are opening Cypress not in like the CI version, you literally see the test running, and you see the screen moving, like the clicks happening, and so on and so forth. And you just checking to expect something to be on the screen or text to be present. So it's really every component working together versus the individual component, like the individual like toast notification, for example. So those are the two kind of separation between Cypress and testing library. You want to do more on a component level or like end-to-end, like entire system level. And I don't know if anyone has to add anything on top of that, like, please, or if I'm saying bullshit. Like,
it is the same. I think it is an art to figure out what to test on, because there's such a thing as brittle tests, which means the tests that break anytime you change any part of the code. If that happens too much, then you're actually adding work to yourself, because you have to make 2 changes every single time you make parts of the code. Like you should be testing for high level behaviors and not too much on the implementation detail, including such things as just a simple text on the words. That's a controversial opinion. You may actually have different opinions depending on where you work, but it's something that we probably should be discussed, because there's such a thing as over testing, and that actually becomes just busy work. It's not really contributing anything to the product. The other thing I'll mention for front end is visual regression testing, which is also very common. So there are like 2 vendors that do visual regression testing. So the supporters of Storybook are a very, very well-known one. So this is Chromatic. Basically, whenever you push a test, they'll say like, okay, they'll render it and then they'll look at the difference. I don't think they have a really good screenshot. So this is like baseline versus new, and then you've got some visual differences, and they'll actually show you like here's the difference in what you pushed. That's all I know. I've never actually used this in practice, but this is supposed to be the next frontier in UI testing. But people have been saying this for a while, and I haven't really seen it take off. So make of that what you will. But visual regression testing is the last thing on.
Yeah, I think I've only had one place where we actually did any visual regression testing whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, you have to be like robust to like, okay, the pixels shifted like one pixel down or something, and it starts yelling at you. But there's a bunch of like Browser Stack. It looks like it's doing that. I don't know. There's maybe it's a very small category. One more thing, Chad, I know that you had your hand up. One more thing that I wanted to mention was, people were mentioning types and tests. So I did write this post up on CSS Tricks, where I try to visualize types versus tests. So if you have a space of incorrect code and you have a space of correct code, which is the one that you want, and your program. So the green, this is very hard to visualize. The light green is where you want to be, and the dark green is where you actually are. In other words, there's always some diff between, like that's what a bug is, right? A difference between your intended behavior and your actual behavior. And so tests help you sort of pin and verify that, like, for example, this intended behavior is performing, this written code is actually in overlapping with your intended behavior. Whereas this is an example of like a failing test, or like an intentionally failing test, which means that this behavior that's not supposed to happen actually does not happen. Much rarer test to actually write. But the idea is that you can start to narrow down the possible space of errors by introducing types that constrain where your implementation goes. But then so there's some they cannot move out of the bounds of the purple box. And then finally, so putting them together, you can combine tests and types to sort of constrain where your implementation goes compared to where your intention wants to be. And that's pretty much as close as you can get it. You can narrow the types as far as possible to constrain to reach your desired implementation, or you can implement more tests to ensure that there's maximum overlap between your intended behavior and your actual implementation. But I thought it was like a nice visual model in case you've never come across it.
But I feel it's like isn't it weird? Like I feel like for me it's always been a little weird the logic of a replace unit test with types, because it's like it's not like C++ it's never been tested or something like that. It's like tests are like unknown thing in C++ or in any like statically typed programs. Like there are tests there too, so it's like it's a mix of the things anyways.
Yeah. Chad, were you going to bring up a testing thing or a different question?
To be honest, I think I've gone through about 3 or 4 questions as the conversation has gone.
Okay.
Actually,
yeah.
So I was, in terms of testing, because you brought up Cypress and things like that. Do you think, like, whenever Cypress has been used on a project that I've been working on, it's always mostly by a QA person as opposed to like the developer who's writing, that particular screen, or who's working on that particular screen. I guess I wanted to just ask, do you think an engineer should be participating in that? Is that something that is okay for a QA engineer to do? Like, I guess kind of question on the culture. What would be, or the not necessarily what's the best, but what's the advantages and trade-offs of an engineer versus a QA person kind of doing those type of work?
I've never worked in a place with QA, so most people just don't have a choice.
I don't know why I have a QA, honestly. I'm not gonna lie. Like my team is like super hell bent on having a QA person on every team on tech, but I don't know.
I've worked in 2 places with QA, and we wrote the tests. They ran through things and had their own use cases and a lot of different stuff. I will say that this was mainly at Avo, which is a legal marketplace where I had these guys, and they were phenomenal. Like, they caught so many crap shoot pieces of code that I almost sent out. I mean, but we wrote the tests. It wasn't their job to like write tests or anything like that. It was on us for that. Now they might come back with us with more use cases and different cases for us to like test and to actually write more tests, but they didn't write them themselves. I did work at Leafly after I left Avo. We had QA there as well. Once again, they didn't write the unit test, but my team's QA guy did start learning Cypress so that he could start writing end-to-end tests for us, which was nice.
I've met a couple startups that are working on improving QA, the QA toolkit, so that they can code their tests to automate themselves rather than rely on engineering time. I think it's nice if you have it, but also not many people. I've never had the chance to work with QA, so okay. Well, one more thing on the testing speed is Charity Majors is the CTO of Honeycomb. and has a very loud opinion that she has loud opinions and everything, but she has loud opinion on testing that you should take less than 15 minutes. So, the AWS test suite is 30 minutes, and I think it's very common actually. So I think Netlify, we took about 30 minutes to 1 hour. And sometimes the test will be flaky, which is even worse, which means sometimes they take 30 minutes, sometimes they take 2 hours. Anyway, so I think a lot of expertise in testing comes down to how do you get rid of flaky tests, how do you parallelize things, how do you unblock things, and also having different layers of testing. So in other words, like maybe stage 1 testing is the quick test, the smoke test, the don't build everything and run everything test, but it'll quickly catch whatever that you might have in like 1 minute, right? And then you maybe only run the full test once a day, or some kind of different frequency. So in other words, don't have one level of tests, have like 3 levels of tests, and some of them are much faster, some of them are more slower but more comprehensive, something like that. And I think that's probably a good idea. But definitely read Charity's stuff for more. I'm going to find one more article before I finish that topic. But yeah, Max, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, just like, because like Trey before said that his test suite kind of takes like half an hour to run. Like I have just one final question on this topic maybe, and then sorry that I kept you on this topic for this while, but
no, it's great. This
like if it takes like half an hour, okay, good. Like if it takes half an hour to run, like how do you deal with like if you have like a production issue or the hotfix? Like because usually like do you just shoot it live without running the tests in CI, or do you have this issue for half an hour?
I think that depends on how much money that bug is costing you.
Okay, I got it. So you can skip it basically.
Honestly, most of the time you wouldn't want to skip it. Amplify, we're a bunch of libraries, so it's not that big of a deal for us. And I mean, places I've seen us put out hot fixes with skipping tests, but most of the time it would be like it better be costing us a lot of money to not run those tests, so we know we didn't break something else.
Yeah,
thank you very much.
Jay has a question about flaky tests.
Thanks for taking the question. So first of all, I work at the same company as Avo at Interbrand. So Trey, nice to meet you. So I had a question about flaky test, and it's been one of the challenging things that I've found, and even really good engineers have struggled with it, especially when some of these flaky tests are written by people who are no longer on the team, and it makes it even more worse because we don't understand the context, and it works most of the time. You go test it manually, it works fine, but these fail off sometimes. So I want to like hear from you guys on like how have you tackled, like what are some strategies that you can look at, like how can you corner these problems down? Like I want to hear the experience from you guys. How have you handled those?
I'll do a quick one while people send thoughts. My instincts to just if you really cannot track it down, is almost to basically delete it and rewrite it from scratch with pieces that you trust. But like that's very easy to say. I'm not sure if in practice it's actually doable. Obviously freeze all the environments and try to eliminate anything non-deterministic, but if there's too much going on in one test, maybe try to break it down until you can trust it, and then build back up to the understanding that the previous engineer had when they left.
Yeah,
and that's pretty much what I would have been saying. Yeah, I mean, you break it down to where you understand it and can see, and then but if you can't, a lot of times, as kind of mentioned on there, it was like for even an engineer that maybe not even on the team and it's challenging to fix, just kind of rewrite it. There's a lot of what almost ends up happening a lot of times in my experience. Is what generally what I would do whenever I was trying to track down a flaky test or deal with that is time box fixing it, the current test, and if I ran out of that time box, then I would just take it as it's time to rewrite that test. And that way, like I have a little bit like mindset towards it at least. We definitely have some of those flaky tests that go on, have to restart in CI.
I actually wonder if So for example, this is the repo. This is my company repo. We are an open source company, so you can actually see this in public. You could just. I wonder if you can mark a test as flaky, and then in the UI, in the testing suite, like if that fails, you can kind of eyeball it and go like, yeah, this is fine. And then what if it gives you a button to ignore that failure, right? And then you can go ahead and CI that. So I think it's interesting, but I haven't seen that in practice. I wonder if people have sort of ignorable tests for
in
CI.
practice, that's what we've done. Just like that's what I see engineers do. Just add ignore this test.
Yeah, but I have so many flaky tests. Look at this, flaky, and all the commits, all the PRs that I made PRs where like the engineer telling me to do it was just like, yeah, I just click the button again and hope that it passes.
Yeah.
And these are like some of the very senior engineers from Uber, and yeah, it's really crazy that that's the solution. Just run it again.
We are right now. Our end test, one of them fails. Like, all right, yeah, no, we know. Just restart that one. It'll be good.
Right.
Might take you 2 times. I don't know. By the time the 25-minute one passes, you can already run this one 3 times. So don't worry, you're okay. Just gotta pay attention. Really, I don't want to pay attention to this stuff.
Right. Yeah.
One of the things
that users can see how many flaky tests their system is running at.
One of the concepts on testing that like that kind of your remarks on like levels of testing and such, Sean, is one of the things we did at SageMaker at AWS. So we had canary tests. So that's another aspect of things. So canary tests are test suites that run on live instances all around the world, just to make sure like the application is running in this area, like all over the world. And so if a server goes down in Asia, we know about it like that. And we can fix that one region. And then generally end-to-end tests. And that's one of those things where we did that. We had we would take the tests that are like core workflow tests, must work. And those would be we make those as efficient and as very fast possible as possible, to where they would run every 30 seconds to a minute. And then we would have those levels, like these tests run in this amount of time. These tests take 5 minutes. These tests take 10 minutes. And we'd actually have several different levels of automation to where it would run these tests automatically in every single region across the world, every 30 seconds, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, depending on the depth of them. But that way we could test those core functionalities really quick and really and all the time, and know really fast if something broke. But those deeper functionalities that we weren't as worried about, that were harder to test, we could take the time. I don't see a lot of people doing anymore either, or a lot of places is canary testing.
Yeah. Maybe we should enumerate all the different types of testing, because I feel like it's very obviously the Kensi-DOS testing trophy has kind of taken quite a lot of attention, but then we also brought up visual regression testing. We also brought up canary testing. Smoke test is one format of that as well. I don't know. Maybe it's worth something. Max, you also brought up Kent Beck. So just in case you didn't know, he actually did a series recently on test desiderata. It's a big fancy word, but I trust that you saw it. It's the most recent thing that he put out on testing. So it's his most updated opinion. He is definitely an extreme programmer as far as his opinions are concerned, but I think it's still worth considering all these extremes. You actually reminded me of one opinion that I had. So there's one opinion that I've had that is popular. So I talked about testing for interviews, but then also we should talk about testing for learning a code base. So this is one of the, I think I may have linked this in the book, but I'm just going to bring it up again. Never enough tests. Let's see. So yeah, this is probably my first ever viral tweet, which is back in 2018, and this is still me getting going with Twitter. But yeah, so this is me onboarding to the Netlify code base, and I volunteered to write some tests, and I learned about product, a part of the product that I never thought existed. I never even knew it existed. And so it really helps you to solidify your knowledge of the product by just volunteering to write tests when you join a company. And basically you can't really break the products. So that's something I would definitely volunteer about testing. I had a second point to bring up, but I actually forgot what I was gonna bring up about testing. I don't know. It's just a great tool. Oh, yeah. I don't know. Has anyone done it as part of the onboarding process?
Not personally. I just know of my friend that was telling me how she onboarded recently, not recently, like last year at Rivian. And that was like one of the main things that she's done for the first like few weeks. It was like all about testing and just like getting familiar with the testing suite just to get familiar with the stack. And so I know like her, I know other people like just by saying, but like the only person I know that has actually gone through as a like kind of mandatory thing was her.
Yep.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I have a separate testing related topic to go on to, but I want to hear from you, Chad.
I kind of ended up onboarding using testing by accident, or through testing by accident, because I joined a company and they had the code base there, and I had no idea how to kind of how to begin to approach it. And what ended up happening is that there was a random meeting one day that they were saying, hey, your tests, there's not enough test coverage, and you need to bump that up. But nobody seemed interested, and I was just like, this seems like a good way of kind of learning the code base. And I wouldn't say I actually learned the code base a lot from testing, but I ended up learning. I ended up pairing with another engineer, and that's where I got a lot of my kind of preliminary knowledge about the code base. Because to be honest, I didn't write a lot of, it was React code, and I didn't write a lot of React code at the time. So it was very much like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I watched a few videos just to get it up to speed, but what do you think about this? So it was just kind of like an excuse to do a lot of pairing. I've seen other videos kind of suggest, I've seen somebody talk about when you're onboarding onto a company, to write tests for them and to do a fair amount of things. So I guess from my experience, it was a positive experience, and I would recommend it. But yeah, that was pretty much it.
Yep, agreed. Actually, it looks like both George and Max are starting new jobs. So congrats. I mean, maybe the secret goal of this community is to get people, into better and better jobs. And well, I'm not sure how quickly we should aim for people to start churning between companies, because I don't know. I'm also thinking about churning to a different company. So, but no, I mean, I think people should always be interviewing and improving their job situation.
Jump ship and make more money.
Jump ship and make more money. Exactly. Money. Get that bag. Okay, I have a related topic. So, in that category of like testing, right? We talked a lot about integration or end-to-end or unit testing and manual testing is one thing that we haven't talked about. So the literally go through and manually click through to verify and reproduce cases. One thing I think that people don't emphasize enough of is to reduce the cost of manual testing. And the way to do that is fixtures. To have like lying around a playground where you have the thing already set up, and it quickly gets you to that state that there's a known state that's problematic. So whenever people report bugs on that issue, you can just quickly sort of go there and bring up that fixture and then you can start manually testing. The idea that I have for this is coming from the Facebook React repo. And you can see like they have Circle CI, the CodeSandbox, GitHub, packages, scripts. Actually, one of like the 6 top level folders is fixtures. And this is a part of the code base that people don't really talk about, but actually it's pretty useful in a sense of you cannot test for everything, especially when you're like doing like a lot of browser stuff, and people are reporting, and you're the size of React, and people are reporting all sorts of really stupid, weird browser issues, right? And you have to support all of them. So the way to do this is to set up a fixture that everyone can run quickly and just get up to a point at which you can manually test for whatever condition is there. So most of us do not work on a library like this, but you can imagine some part of your app where if people report a bug, it's actually kind of hard to get to because you need to enter in a bunch of details and like set up a bunch of users and set up organizations, basically like see the database or whatever. Just like automate all that and call it a fixture and just have it up and ready to run, so that it's very easy to reproduce manually in the absence of automatic. I think it's really interesting advice. So this is something I picked up here and started talking a little bit about. I actually got pushback from the React team because their contribution. When did Andrew talk about it? So Andrew is actually on the React team and he disagreed with me. So he said internal end-to-end test suite is great, meaning that they put React into Facebook.com, and Facebook.com has a bunch of integration of end-to-end tests. So of course they're going to catch a whole bunch of things there. But yeah, they basically his whole point is like, don't rely on fixtures and don't stop at fixtures. Once you identified the bug, do try to turn it into an automated test eventually. But I still think it's an underrated like technique for manual testing. That's a pain, right? Like there's so many times to repro a bug takes so much effort, you just don't do it. So, all right, that's my spiel on fixtures. Okay, any other topics? I can wrap it up with some commentary, but I think this is a really good discussion. I love that you brought it up, Max. I thought this is something that we all have pain with, so you're not alone. But anyway,
thanks
I'm
all
going to
for
give you a clap
engaging
for
with
that.
it. Thanks.
Okay, so in relation to, I guess, the topic of the week, I think about Sparking Joy in a very general sense of the word. So the SparkJoy repo is actually more about design tools, but the SparkJoy principle is more about bringing delight to the people that you work with, right? So if your coworker had the flaky test, and it's just been a pain in the ass for the past 2 years, and you came along and you're like, okay, I'm going to spend 1 week to just go and fix it and get it out of everybody's hair. I think that starts to bring delight to people's work. And I think definitely, the point that we mentioned with charity majors about how you should try to bring down your CI/CD to 15 minutes in order for people to move faster, to not fear committing their code and not fear deploying. I think it's very true. I think it's just a sense of like, you're able to move faster and to do more stuff when you enjoy the work and when your tooling actually sort of sings alongside with you. And I think that's a little bit of the principle that we're talking about this week. So see, I found a way to tie it back. Testing with Sparking Joy. But other than that, obviously there is a lot of design stuff here. But we do have a lot of examples of how to spark joy in your code to make people basically look forward to working with you, to make people like, it's often the small things, that people give you in terms of when people give feedback or they give background check, like sort of review reference quotes and stuff like that of what it's like to work with you. It's often the small thoughtful things that you do for others that can really make a difference. Yeah, so I'll just leave it at that. It's one of my favorite chapters in terms of like people don't really talk about this as like a coding type principle, but it's I do think that it's an extra thing that if you have the energy, of course, if you because it's not nobody, this kind of thing is never really required in a job, but if you do have the energy, I think it definitely adds a polish to your work. Okay, in the absence of any other questions or topics, I think we can call it. I thought this was a really good session. It's kind of focused. Oh, I see Chad raise your hand.
Yeah, so the idea of kind of sparking joy is really interesting, but I don't know if you mentioned, like, it's not something that people kind of talk about. It's not like one of those things that people bring up. So I had a conversation with somebody, I think it was Thursday, about like one of the things that they would do is when they had like some work that they work, but when they had a project that they were working on, one of the things that they would have is a command that would
Did he cut out?
Oh. So it was like an issue. What was
your audio is cutting in and out for
Sorry,
me. I'm not sure if it's my side.
are you there?
Doing the same for me.
Oh, I think it's me, but
Oops.
can you hear me properly now?
Yeah, mostly. Try again.
Oh, yeah, no, it's no problem. So yeah, I think to a friend of mine, and one of the things that he does in his project is he will have like a command where
Oh God.
yeah, I just give me 1 second. Actually,
Or you can type it out.
or I could do that. Yeah. Let me try to do it.
All right. I saw another hand. I didn't see who it was. Okay. So someone else raised. Oh, Melio. Hey.
Yeah. Hello. You said, can you guys hear me fine?
Yes.
Yeah. You said it's one of your favorite chapters of the book. I also think that it's one of my favorite. And well, there's only one funny thing about sparking joy that I think it's inherent of human interactions, is that sometimes your teammates don't like the fact you are over delivering. I have a real story to tell. When I decided to change careers to IT, I started studying web development, but when I actually migrated, I ended up going to the DevOps field. And when I started in my new DevOps role, one thing that I noticed is that the DevOps team was being called a lot of time for meetings to explain to developers how they should organize their repositories to make use of our pipeline. And we were repeating those really basic and boring things all the time. Then, thanks to the time I spent studying web dev, I had an idea to create a quick start guide website using Jekyll. And it was very well received by the developers, which is the target audience. Everyone liked having the answers for the doubts in an accessible website instead of having to go to a meeting. But then the side effect of that, of sparking joy like that, is that a couple of team members started to say in a sarcastic tone things like, now we need to be a front-end developer too. Things like that. I think it's it's inherent to human interaction. So just a side effect of being sparking joy.
Sure. Yeah. I think at some level you can't really avoid that. But as long as you're genuinely trying to help the team, and it's fine.
Yeah.
People make comments and jokes, but you don't have to take it personally. Cool. So Chad, also asks, how did you find new ways to spark and join your code, since this is potentially not a topic that gets talked about a lot? We have a section on that, right? So spark and join code. I just listed down some ideas, especially from a lot of people who have worked on this, in their comments. In their respective fields. I think for a lot of this stuff, I will admit, is very high level and conceptual. To actually apply it takes a lot of work. The easy one is comments. Having a really good philosophy of explaining code and not over explaining and not over commenting, but giving just enough, I think it's really helpful. And I included quite a few sources on what good comments might look like. Let's see if this link still works. Yeah, I think it should still work. So inside of this comment, imagine if you had a system diagram of like, okay, here's everything that's going to go on in the rest of this code, right? But you just had a whole bunch of comments like explaining what this system is. That's one example, right? So what tools do you use to create a diagram like this? There are tools, by the way, that let you manipulate these boxes of ASCII diagrams. So having those tools easily at hand reduces the cost of you creating tools like this, creating visualizations like this. And that starts to spark joy, because every time someone comes across this code base, they'll be like, oh, I have someone who spent some time thoughtfully explaining what this thing does, so I don't have to figure it out for myself. So I think that's one example, but comments is probably the cheapest form of that. Error design is another one. My favorite example of errors is the Gatsby error. Like, this does not spark joy, thank you, Gatsby. And this is very common, right? For people who are just like hacking on a MVP and then they ship it and then they forget to go back and fix the error. And this does not spark joy. So having a really thoughtful error that actually tries to anticipate what's going on, maybe tells you how to fix the error, maybe suggests possible causes. Those are really good things to start thinking about. So those are the two, highest areas of opportunity: comments and errors. I'm sure you can find more. But I just think I think just having the principle and looking for opportunities itself opens up your mind. ASCII flow, yes, Antonio, yes, that's the one I was thinking about. I've actually used this in Netlify. Yeah. This is great. Okay. Well, so yeah, I mean, hopefully that helps. I think it's just a great topic in general for just coming up with ideas for stuff. Definitely, I do think a lot about design, maybe because like we're talking about, I definitely have a front end background. And the SparkJoy repo that I have is even in stuff like README, right? Like if you introduce like a nice big banner that's like gives you a happy color, like that already preempts you or like persuades you to being favorably biased towards a project. Like color choice evokes emotion, and then having a whole bunch of useful resources. I think just like maintaining a list that you trust, that you've personally curated, that you can always go back and like increase your productivity to do this stuff. I think that definitely is a skill that you can develop. And what looks hard to other people, what looks like too much effort to other people, just because you spend a little bit more time on it than others, actually can be very easy. Melio.
There is one trick that it's even mentioned in the chapter, is that we should put in the comments the link to the Stack Overflow answer we got the solution. Yeah, that's really simple and useful. Yeah.
I wonder if let's see if we have that. I definitely have that in my own code, but let's see, stackoverflow.com. Yeah. No, we don't have it here, but we have it in other places. I have it in, I think anyway, yes, yeah. Leave the link, because then people can find it and figure out if you made a mistake, people can find what issues went wrong. Anyway, yeah, that's a really good tip. All right, cool. I think that's about it. This is a really good discussion. Yeah, Trey says spent nearly as much time on making good error messages as I did logic on the last feature I worked on. Yeah, I think error message, people really don't think about it. If they even remember to handle the error, the worst, probably worse than a bad error message, is swallowing errors. So try to have some experience in spotting cases where you're doing that. But otherwise, sparking joy is a really good principle. Okay, we are coming up to the end of the principles chapter. I'm going to go ahead and assign, or we'll just mention that next week we'll try to cover 15, 16. These are all pretty short, and 15, 16, and 17. So these are the sort of three that we'll sort of cover together, and then in 2 weeks from now we'll cover the writing chapter, which is going to be a heavy one. I actually intend to create a separate writing chapter. So this is a chapter about why you should write. It's not about how to write. It's just about why. But I think that I picked up a lot over the past 2 years on just writing and advice. So I hope to show you what I've been working on with the writing chapter here. So this is the actual code base for the book. And I have been accumulating for the past 2 years everything about writing here that I really like. So I'm basically intending to turn this into a whole new chapter for us. So yeah, that's a preview of what's going to come. And obviously we'll take more questions next week. And whatever comes up in your work, we can always discuss, because this is a nice small community of people who care as much as you do. All right, anything else that people want to bring up before we call it an evening? Let me make sure I'm sharing my sound before I do this. My favorite. whenever I ask a question and I don't get a response, that's why I'm going to play. Anyway, so this is great. Yeah.
Oh, I just have one question. So I guess I'm gonna be quick as we can. I do have one last interview coming for a front end lead position at a startup here in New York, and it's gonna be like a Scrum team type of simulation where they give me a feature, and we're gonna work with a few developers to scrum out the feature. Does anybody have any suggestions in terms of, especially when it comes to front end estimation and an approach to things like risks and Scrum pointing in the front end environment? Because I've done most of my Scrum experience has been in backend, and there is a little bit of different approach to doing that. But I don't know if anyone has either resources or just opinions on when it comes to pointing out stuff or an estimation of work front end for front end related stuff.
No, I'm gonna just base it on your past experience.
Okay, gotcha. All right, no problem then.
Yeah, I can give something. So I've had full stack teams who do Scrum, and it's basically do the same thing as backend. If you are able to break it down, and one thing that we try to do is that if it is more than 8 points approximately, if it's going to take more than a week, we break the story down into smaller ones. So it's then the pointing that it depends. Different teams go differently. Some go by velocity. Everyone says they follow Scrum, but nobody follows actual Scrum. They follow some combination of Scrum and Kanban, and there's a Scrumban. That's a real thing. Search for Scrumban. That's a real thing. So everyone says they follow Scrum, but nobody follows right Scrum. But I think it's more of pace yourself when you watch when they talk. Use your spikes when you're not able to estimate. Say you have to do a spike, time box that spike, and then give an estimate. If you're not able to give an estimate, or cut the problem into smaller pieces and give keep it as simple as possible. That way, the estimate that you give is they're able to reason with that estimate. Right? Like whoever is the project manager that is hearing your estimate is like, oh yeah, that sounds right for that work, right? Like sort of it's, if it are you asking about like, or will they ask Scrum related questions, or like how to participate as a front-end engineer in a Scrum?
Yeah, no, that's the definitely helps. Like it's more like, yeah, understanding like in what version to like participate in like the front end. Like my opinion is like, given that this is gonna be a Scrum team with both front end and back end, like I'm gonna be the part of the front end person.
Right.
I assume I'm gonna have like as many like clarifying questions in terms of like where we are at with the back end for like this type of feature. Like where is the, like, do we have like the clear data requirements, like the last that I'm trying to just understand from there and like point out. I guess every team points out in a different way. Like I know, like for example, for my team is like never more than like above 5 points is you just break it down.
Right.
So, but like for example, for other people, I've seen there's like 20 points is the maximum or something. So it's like, I guess
so
it's gonna be relative.
that. You cannot compare that. Like when I used to work at Intuit, there was one team that did 35 points, another team that did 120 points, but the work was about the same. They just put a big number on the points, right? So you just so that doesn't matter at all. What you want to follow is, what does your team do? Like are they and follow their procedures. Like if you're joining an existing team, just watch how they are. And since you have backend experience, it's even easier. See, oh, for this certain task, they mark if for a day's worth of work, they think it's 1 point, or if it is 2 days worth of work, is 1 point. Does 1 point mean just changing a configuration, or does 1 point mean writing a small feature? Right.
Okay,
So
gotcha.
right? And then you pace yourself along the same thing, along the same lines. So it's mostly reading what your team does and following the same. Yeah.
All right, well, thank you so much. I really appreciate the insights and everything. Really, thank you so much.
I'll contribute one thing, which is personally the thing I care about most is uncertainty. When you start out on a project, there are some areas which you are not really sure how you're going to implement it. So I like the hill chart example from Basecamp. This is actually built into their products, where they say like, forget points. There's some parts where like you just don't know how long it's going to take because you've never done it before, or you haven't really tried to implement it. The design is still not done yet. Like we have to implement something and then really try to learn more about what the ecosystem has in order to figure it out. The only thing that you know is the gradient that you're currently standing on. Is it uphill or downhill? Meaning like, is it uphill in terms of like, it seems to get harder the more you try to do stuff with it, or is it going downhill, meaning like you're always making progress? You're like, okay, I'm pretty clear about like where this is going to end. Here obviously is lesser points, here it has more points, but really uncertainty is the main thing, right? Because uncertainty, you don't know how high the hill is going to go. It could be like really super high, or it could actually be easier than you think. Uncertainty works both ways in development, especially if you find a third-party library that you can just magically import and solves all your problems. So I like the hill chart. I don't know how to quantify it. It's just a game.
No, that actually, I didn't know about this approach. I think it kind of feels like it makes sense to me in terms of like understanding that, and I feel like I can come up with discussions on like these points. Like if you feel it, I feel like where the work is in terms of like where we are on the hill, where we feel we are on the hill in terms of like are we just like we know what we have to do, or we don't know where we are, and then I think I can take it from there as a conversation starter.
Yeah. I will add one thing around hill charts. I've used hill charts in a slightly different way, and that is when presenting to management about a project. So usually it's when it is on the right side of when it's on the left side of the hill, it means I still don't know what are the issues in this, and I need more of their help and guidance. Whereas on the right side, it's all about me. Once it's on the top of the hill, the remaining is just effort. Prior to that is discovery. Like before, and I need more of my managers and executives' help. So I put a bunch of, when I'm running multiple projects, I'll put multiple projects in there and say, here are the projects where I know that I can execute, where everything is clear. It's just a matter of building. And here are the projects where I'm not very sure. Like I have problems, and we need to have a discussion around that, right? And I think it is also possible. It exactly like what you said in the early, especially if you're joining a new team. Those are the areas where you want to pull your manager or your lead or whoever it is, like to say, I'm not clear about this, right? I'm still not at the top of the hill to give you. It's not about execution. I need help. Right? So it's a really nice tool to put in front of them, and everyone gets it immediately. This is not about the amount of effort. It's about where I am in my mind about this project, and there's still lack of clarity, right? And it works in different all the way to executive management.
Yeah, because it's simple enough for them to understand. Sorry, who was speaking? Was it Chad?
Oh, yeah. So funny enough, I actually kind of have some a similar problem like this at work, but I don't feel like I have kind of like the social capital to bring it up. Like we're having a problem where we're kind of we're essentially always coming across problems as we're kind of developing, and we have like a release date coming up, and I'm just learning about this kind of idea, and I would like to bring it up, but I'm not sure if I should. So I just kind of wanted to ask the question of, like, I just kind of wanted to ask people's opinions about if I should, and how do I go about doing that? Like, just kind of describing this kind of idea.
I don't understand the problem that's being presented.
Oh, okay. So we've been kind of working on it's a new team, and we've been given like a high priority project, but everybody is kind of that's actually a good, maybe this isn't necessarily the best idea, but the best approach to this problem. But yeah, never mind, don't worry about it. Apologies.
Yeah, why don't you post on sort of maybe type it up, frame it better, and then you can post on Discord, and we'll be happy to discuss it.
Okay, cool.
Okay, one last thing to share. That's something I've done more recently, which is, in order to, so I called it the Z index problem of, like, everyone thinks that points, more points is good, and the more points that we knock out is better. So to avoid the Z index problem, you have to make everything relative. And so this is something that we did internally at Temporal, which is kind of like a shared language of exercise, a shared language exercise. And the idea is that instead of doing points, you have a second dimension of it's the impact versus whether or not it's done soon or not soon. So is it downhill or is it uphill, right? So that hill idea is sort of incorporated into this, compared with the impact as well. And the idea is we do not only tackle priority 0 tough stuff all the time. We also tackle some small stuff, because priority 0 stuff there's always going to be never-ending amounts of priority. Everything's important, right? Everything's important. Everything's big. And if we only spend our time on big stuff, we'll never get the small stuff done. So the idea is to try to fit the big stuff in a good mix, and then fill in the rest of the space, because this is the ultimate, the amount of time in each sprint is the ultimate limiting factor. We only have 26 sprints a year, maybe probably less, probably like 20. And having good sizing and something that probably cannot be that cannot be gamed is the goal. To be able to say, like, okay, like there's 8 is not better than 5 is somehow not better than 3. It's just like, is this high impact, or is it done soon? If so, like, let's make sure that we do it here. Everything else, that's maybe like lower context that can be done on the side. We can just fill it in around the edges. So it's kind of like this. And then every now and then we need to pause to refactor, or to catch up, or to clear some technical debt. We should schedule for that as well. So this is just the rough framework that we had. We call it jar filling. And I really like the tagline of we're in the business of moving mountains. In order to move mountains, you have to break things up. So I haven't published this one. All right. Well, that's it. We're a little bit over time, but I really appreciate the discussion. This is amazing, by the way. I really love like the perspective that everyone's bringing. So let's just keep it up. I hope people are enjoying this, and I'll see you next week. Bye, everyone.
Right.
Thank you so much. Yeah, nicely done.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Sean.
Thank you, guys. Bye, guys.
So is the claps coming through? I'm playing claps.
Oh no, it's not coming. Now
See,
you're.
I played the claps. Yeah, so I have to share audio to play claps.
Yep.
And then I can play this.
Also, congrats, George, to the
I'm on the phone with Richard Winters.
What is that? What is Richard Winters?
Oh, sorry, that was something on my side. That's actually from a thing called Mankind Project.
All right. Enjoy your weekends, everyone. See ya.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, guys.